This is the Lucy Beatrix podcast. Today's episode is about what I think everyone can do to improve as athletes or specifically runners, based on my own experience going from a non-athlete to running things like a 2:44 in the marathon or breaking 17 minutes in the 5K. Basically, what I'm saying is I think that these things are things that you can incorporate in your life to become better or just improve overall. For me, running is something that I do to level myself out and feel the best version of myself that I can be. So that's why I want to share with you guys what I think has worked for me as I'm on this path towards becoming a better athlete, becoming a better person, overall just improving my quality of life. So let's get started. The first thing I would say is actually nothing related to recovery or training, but the idea of keeping a daily journal. And what's funny about this is I feel almost like I'm revealing myself saying this, but I have kept a daily journal that's public that I write in basically every single day for the past year. And this is something that I started right after I relapsed about 14 months ago. I decided that I wanted to stay accountable with something that I did every single day to write out my thoughts, whether they're good or bad or logical or whatever. I just wanted to keep track of where my thinking is and then use that as a reference point to go back to and see how I've made progress. Because sometimes if you don't keep a daily log of your thoughts, you can't actually see the trajectory of how you're improving. And for me, having a daily journal is this really great way for me to go back and see how I was thinking maybe a month ago or a few months ago and see what my thoughts were then and what my priorities were then, and remind myself of either how far I've come or what I was focusing on then, and try to stay tethered to certain goals. So yeah, basically having a daily journal, whether it's public or not, has been something for me that's kept me on the right track with my big goals or my long-term goals. And I also like personally having it public because it's sharing the story and including people along the way, whether I know my readers or not. It's this idea of having people kind of in on this path that I'm on, or feeling like they're part of it too, even though a lot of what I talk about is extremely personal. So in my journal, I love that I go back, I'm scrolling through it right now. I love that I just scroll through and I can see that what I typically talk about a lot is the mindset behind training, how I feel about my own paces or where I am with training, whether it's very excited or not excited, or all the things surrounding the miles that I'm excited about. So for example, when I first moved to Austin 6 months ago, which was something I did kind of on a whim, and I wasn't totally sure what I was doing. I kind of picked a spot on the map and just moved here. I love going back and reading my thoughts surrounding moving here and reminding myself of my why. And I originally came out here to focus on my athlete side, or really get myself away from all of the hectic chaos of New York City, of who I was there, because for 16 years in New York City, I was this fashion model. Come to somewhere completely new, like Texas, and be a different iteration of who I am. So that's kind of cool to see that that thought building and then ultimately turning into me moving here, and that evolution. Because it's like seeing the growth and the progress that kind of keeps you excited about what's ahead. So yeah, the other thing I noticed in my daily journal is I talk a lot about the exciting food adventures that I have, of things that I've ventured out and tried. And yeah, it's just like a cool documentation for me, and it's different than with just social media of just posting a post with a picture or a video. It's a little bit more cerebral because it's really truly fleshing out what's in my head, and thinking about my mindset, and maybe even holding a mirror up to where my headspace is at certain parts of training. that I can reflect back on. So I can even see like where I was getting ready for the marathon when I ran a 2:44, and see how nervous I was and how I wasn't sure if I was doing things right. And then like to ultimately see that result and go, oh yeah, it took weeks of not knowing if I was going to be able to execute the plan on race day. And that's kind of part of it sometimes, or like the unknown. And so, yeah, keeping a journal is something that I think is very important. And I would recommend that for first and foremost for embarking on this like athlete way of life of self-reflection. Yeah. So on that note about personal growth, which I think comes with journaling or writing, and harboring this practice of self-reflection, I think another thing is having a really great therapist and going to therapy every week. A little over a year ago, it was actually a year and a half ago, I started going to therapy. And that's been baked into my routine in the way that I feel like I'm missing something if I don't have it. So my therapist, I don't know how I got so lucky, but I found this therapist who really learned what I'm all about, what my goals are, and has helped me stay on track in a big way, where they meet with me once a week, but then they also offer little check-ins throughout the week to make sure I'm still like staying on track towards my goals, and keep a perspective that I've always needed. And I think that before I ever had therapy, I kind of just dealt with stuff and like white knuckled my way through hard times. But it's been really helpful to have somebody to objectively bounce off of and say like, am I crazy here? Like, what is this? Or like, how would you feel if this happened? And it's a really great way to have somebody to kind of funnel my thoughts into the right direction. And while my therapist never makes decisions for me, they ask me the right questions to get me to my own conclusion that gets me to where I want to go. And I think about even the Chicago Marathon. That was such a great example of, I remember talking to my therapist thinking, am I going to even do this? I don't even know. And it was just so helpful having someone there basically get me to that starting line and make me feel like no matter what happens, like, I've got this. And that kind of comfort kind of helped me get to where I wanted to go. So having a really great therapist and meeting with that therapist once a week has been integral for my life of getting some of the athletic accomplishments and just some of the life things happen. So that would be another suggestion I would say for just like this idea of having self-improvement. So the next thing is kind of goes without saying, but as I read all these running memoirs where throughout these 5 books that I just covered through the audio version, because I did them as audiobooks, I talked about this in the last episode, but I loved hearing these runners and these athletes talking about food in a positive way. And I think that like I'm noticing, and I've noticed this for a long time, obviously with my upbringing as a fashion model for so long, that our society often loses, especially in the fitness community, our society has lost touch with the love of food, of just saying, wow, things that I'm putting in my body that have these macro and micronutrients then turn my body into something else that can go do really cool things. So it's kind of like this reframing of how food isn't just calories or just something that's going to give you the glycogen to go run fast and far, but thinking of it as something really positive and almost magical, because I think about how my relationship with food has evolved and changed from the days as a fashion model and like my requirements with weight, and how I had to be so strict and so diligent about it, and like it stressed me out so much to kind of like fight with my body, thinking about how I had to eat and whatever. But now as an athlete, having this sense of freedom that food is the thing that propels me forward and gives me this superpower strength. and to enjoy it and get excited about it. And I definitely have noticed, even in more recent months since I've moved to Texas, how this ritual surrounding food is also so important, because it's not just something that I do because I have to. It's something that I get to do to live a fulfilling life, and then also as a result go do really cool things like run. And on that same sentiment, I feel like lately for me, training has been this reflection not only of how well I'm fueling and like what I'm putting into my body, but that trickles down into every aspect of other activities besides food. So things like how I take care of myself with just keeping my home tidy, and like keeping my, my sleep hygiene like healthy, of just getting enough sleep and rest, and knowing when to say yes to social obligations and when to say no and take more time to recover. And so I think that there's like this chain reaction for me, at least, especially when it comes to like what I'm actually physically consuming, to how I go about my days, where it's like if I eat well and hearty and I'm feeling strong, then everything else that I'm doing kind of like falls into that, and I'm less likely to pick up other things that are kind of like not as healthy for me. So yeah, the fueling is huge. That's just been an important part of my story too, just like from transitioning from fashion model to athlete. And then I think that the other thing about training and like becoming a better athlete is being multifaceted and not being attached to any one outcome. I obviously have really big goals of things that I want to do with my running. Like I have some dreams that I know that if I put my head down and try to work towards, I can accomplish. But it's important to not have that be the only thing. So like having a North Star or like an A race or a time goal, that's good. But I've been really learning how to decouple myself from my identity as a runner only. Because it's only been recently that I've like actually stepped into the skin of being a runner. But that said, I also think that I like to have other things, other pieces of the puzzle that are driving forces to keep me going, that I can like use all of the monotonous time on feet running to think about the other things too. So it's like they kind of work together. So it's like having this idea that I like making music, I like writing, and so having other projects in my head while I'm going and running is really important to me. And just learning. Like I feel like a big part of me and what makes me is I love to learn, and I love to take that stuff that I hear, the knowledge, and apply it to my actual life. So whether that's listening to audiobooks or podcasts, or even some of the songs that I wrote while I'm running, I feel like that kind of makes the running more enjoyable, and it kind of makes the training just happen. But another thing that I think is kind of a cool idea is to have a hero or a mentor or somebody that you look up to and you're like, you're awesome. And then in your head, whenever you're kind of at a crossroads of like, should I do this or that? Ask, what would so-and-so do in this moment? If you have someone that you really look up to, find that person. For me, it's a couple people. I have, Dina Castor, who's this amazing Olympic marathoner. Like historically, she's just one of the best. Rich Roll, who's this amazing podcaster who I've had the pleasure to meet. I had dinner with him a long time ago, way before I was ever an athlete, with a few friends in New York. And like a few of these people in my head that I'm like, I look up to these people. My mom is one of them. Having these people and go, what would so-and-so do? So like when I last night, and I came home from an event that I went to with one of my friends, and I was feeling good. I was feeling charged up. And I was thinking, should I go do a shakeout? Should I go shake out the legs before dinner? Get some extra mileage. I'm starting to build back up for the marathon. Or should I just chill and kind of like be lazy? And in that moment, I thought, what would Dina Castor do? She'd go do a shakeout. So I did, and I felt amazing. And I ran a 6:40 something pace, just like on tired legs. And I was like, yeah, like this is this is the difference. This is what separates the boys from the men, is what would this Olympian do in this moment versus what do I maybe want to do or what's easy. And same goes for Rich Roll. I think, what would Rich Roll do when I'm thinking about certain topics and how to talk about them? How would Rich Roll talk about something that's maybe a little bit controversial? And, what kind of sets of standards does he have? And I mean, I don't know for sure what he would do in every little situation, but I kind of think by listening to him so much on his podcast, this is what I think, what I project maybe he would do if he were me in this situation. And then with my mom, I think about more of the interpersonal relationships and things that I've seen my mom do in her life to get to where she wanted to go. And so it's kind of a combination of finding a bunch of heroes and then thinking, what would they do when you're in the situation that you're trying to decide. So yeah, those are some of my quick things that come to mind quickly for what I would suggest anyone do as they're embarking on this, on being better athletes. And oddly, a lot of these things had nothing to do with training itself, which training is obviously a big part of the equation. But I think it's a lot about conjuring the mindset of an athlete before anything else. And that's something that I think has been what took me from non-athlete to running fast and far. And it's what kind of keeps me on that track. So I hope that you got something out of this mini solo-sode, kind of revving you up. This is kind of a Coach Lucy episode. But I hope you guys can find me on Instagram. Reach out, let me know what you think, or if you have any topics you'd like me to talk about as your coach. So yeah, find me on Instagram. I'm at Lucy Beatrix, LucieBeatrix. And until next time, just be fast. Just win.